someone once said I put the vision, heaven on earth, and someone said, well, that's a very Christian vision, and that isn't fair. So I want to be clear that when we say heaven, that is a Christian languaging, but what we're saying is that the divine infinite love intelligence, that which is in, through, and as all creation and yet transcends all creation, that beautiful, radiant, powerful love that has no limits, that has no conditions, that has no borders, that love starts pouring through all creation, so all creation becomes love itself. That's the vision. And that's what we're here to do every day. Our practices are to awaken, to become this one power and this one presence, to completely align ourselves with this vast oceanic love, this infinite peace, this infinite light, this infinite goodness where there is no opposite. The one power and one presence. Last week, I shared the vision for the lighthouse, that we are a community committed to waking up to the reality and the truth of who we are, this truth that doesn't change, that is absolute. Humanly, we change. Humanly, we have a lot of variations, but this one power and this one presence, this love, is always already. It is birthless, it is deathless, it doesn't come, it doesn't go. It is always here, and that we are here as a community to both individually and collectively wake up and allow that love to shine through us on every level and dimension of our being. So that's the vision of who we are, and it seems so loving and easy. All we need to do is know our oneness, and we'll just walk around in great harmony. I love that laugh. It reminds me of when I was at Agape. Agape is a spiritual center in Los Angeles, and I was in the office. I was working there, and email was new to me, so I was just learning email, and my family, we tend to be spread all over. And when growing up, we watched the news every night, and we'd talk about what was happening. So, of course, once we discover email, what's the first thing we start talking about? Bosnia. I mean, isn't that what everyone talks about? I don't know how the topic came up. So suddenly I'm on the email, and it's very exciting because we live all over. So suddenly we're communicating. We hardly ever talk on the phone. So we're in this email communication, myself with my brothers and my dad. My mom hadn't gotten on email yet. Simultaneously, I'm working at Agape, and the season of nonviolence had begun. So it must have been right around this time of year. The season of nonviolence was something that was created in 20 years ago, 1999, with Arun Gandhi and Reverend Michael and Association for Global New Thought. That's recognizing 64 days from when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated in January to 64 days later on April 7th when Martin Luther King was killed. So they created a program of nonviolence, of practicing nonviolence every day. So there were readings and exercises to be done for those 64 days. So nonviolence was very in the consciousness where I was working. Everybody was on board. Killing is bad. Being peaceful is good. It's fairly obvious, doesn't it? And Reverend Nirvana Gale, he was the assistant minister at Agape, and his office was connected with ours, so he was in our office a lot. So I just remember this moment. Well, first I'm talking with my brothers, and I think I might have mentioned nonviolence, and they immediately came back at me like I was a crazy person. Like, no, you definitely need violence sometimes. That's why you look at the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II. What would have happened if America hadn't gotten into the war? Well, how long would have Hitler and Japan and their empire lasted if we hadn't got involved? There's times if someone comes to kill my children, I'm going to kill them, and I'm not going to feel badly about it. And they were very passionate, and all of these arguments started to make sense to me. And then I thought, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna. Krishna is the spiritual leader saying, Arjuna, that's your role to play. You're a warrior. You need to go out and fight. And so I had this family that was giving me very rational reasons of why there are absolutely times to kill. And then in a community is saying, no, never is this an answer to not kill. And I even remember one of my brothers called me, my brother Rob, and Reverend Nirvana was in the office, and they started I just stepped out of it. I'm like, you guys go, you talk. And Nirvana just started talking about nonviolence, and has been Nirvana's whole life. So he didn't just talk about it conceptually. His whole being was nonviolent. So once he goes, I don't know, it's hard to explain Reverend Nirvana, but when he starts preaching, you just go, oh yeah, that's so right. So he's just going out, and it kept my brother quiet because you just can't match up to that energy level. So I'm like, it makes so much sense. But then as soon as Nirvana stops talking, I'm thinking, yeah, but still those other points. So I was going back and forth. And I wanted to have an opinion. I really wanted to make a stand, but I couldn't figure out what stand to take without thinking about the other side. So I was rattling back and forth. I saw a practitioner every week. For those of you who don't, we have practitioners in our community. They practice the principles of one power, one presence. They work with us. They meet with us, they pray, and whatever's going on for us, they hold the high watch. They always see the wholeness and the perfection of our being as we get to talk about what's ever happening in our life. Some people use practitioners for a particular event. I'm working through an issue, I go see a practitioner. One thing I love when I was at Agape, seeing a practitioner was just part of the culture. So I saw my practitioner every week, not for a particular issue. It's just, if you're on a spiritual journey, to have someone holding the highest for you and holding that space as we're going through our human stuff, there's nothing better. I highly recommend it. So I was in with my practitioner, and I'm going through this battle of, what do I really believe? Is there times for violence? I'm on a spiritual journey. I can never imagine actually killing somebody. And what if someone was going to kill someone in my family? Would I kill them? And all these thoughts are going in my head of what do I really believe? And then I remember sitting where I knew exactly where I was sitting. I can see it. That moment of revelation, they both can be true. And was that expansive awareness that is spirit, that can hold two totally opposite perspectives, and they both can be true. The human linear mind that is always choosing, there's a right way and a wrong way, there's this and there's that, and we have to make a decision, that's a linear conceptual mind. The infinite presence of pure spirit is much bigger and vaster than that. It contains all human thought and transcends all human thought. So the idea is, as we expand in the awareness of who and what we really are, we can start holding multiple perspectives, and we can allow to arise what needs to arise moment by moment. There are some people who are absolutely in alignment with nonviolence. I think anyone who's on a spiritual path in a profound way, like Reverend Nirvana, like a monastic, it is completely in integrity with their being to not ever kill. And in fact, it would be out of integrity with their being. But I also think there are people on this planet who are here to serve us, just like there are doctors here to serve us. Doctors are not here to be monastics. Doctors are here to heal sick bodies. In the infinite, no one's sick, but here on human world, people get sick. We need our doctors. We need medicine. We need lawyers. We need all the different roles that are played, and one of those roles are warriors. That was the story of Krishna to Arjuna. Arjuna's role was as a warrior. So for him, the integrity of his soul was to care for and protect people in this world of duality. When evil starts pushing evil in the human world, not in the absolute, starts pushing, their role is to protect. And that all of that could be true. So we start to learn as we open to oneness. Oneness is not a narrow thing. Oneness is vast. And it demands us to start holding complexity, to hold vast perspectives. One of the things Ken Wilber talks about, the way he describes what spirituality means, I like the definition of spirituality is just loving with our heart open to infinity. I just love that. The more spiritual we are, our heart's open to infinity. He comes at it more from more of a mental perspective in terms of perspectives, that spirit is every perspective. There's partial truth to every perspective because spirit is in every perspective, and that the more perspectives that we can allow to arise within us, the more in alignment we are with the infinite nature of spirit. There's partial truth to every perspective. So what would that mean as we walk through life and we start realizing that everybody is partially true, that nobody is totally wrong? That means we can't shut down towards somebody, that other person stops being other, that when today's talk is about do unto others as we would have them do unto us, because ultimately, spiritually, recognize there's only one. What I do to somebody else, I do to myself, right? St. Francis said it first. Stephen Covey followed up, seek first to understand before you're going to be understood. We want to be understood. We want people to hear our perspectives. We want to be able to stand up and speak our truth. And we need to do that. We need to say, where are we coming from? But we also need to hear what someone else is saying. And sometimes we can get, the problem is when we start to get rigid. So what I would say is self-righteous, that my perspective is the right perspective, and there's no room to hear another perspective, especially another perspective that is opposite of my perspective. My first real experience of this actually was fairly young, well, high school going in, and then college. I wanted to really be a loving person. That was my goal. And I grew up in an achievement-oriented house. So I didn't want to just be a loving person. I had to be like the most loving person. Because that's, you know, in an achievement-oriented family, being the best was how you felt loved. And if I wasn't the best, I didn't feel loved. So it was a matter of, if I was going to be lovable, I had to be really loving. Like, I had to excel at this. But I didn't know how to excel at love because no one ever talked about love in my family. So it was just a sort of an abstract thought of how to be loving. But the thing that was talked in my family were values, good and bad. Ethics were very important in my family to do the right thing. So the way I decided that I was going to be the most loving person was I was going to be a really, really good person. And so every choice I made was about being really good. And of course, my brother gave me the title Goody Two-Shoes. I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? Because I was really clear that I was going to do everything right. I don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't steal. We would go out to parties in high school and everyone would be drinking and I would never drink. You know, I just did everything. I didn't tell people, but I was very clear inside. I am a good person. And my whole identity was that goodness. Like, I started to really hold on to it. Like, that became my worth and my value was how good I was. Which I didn't realize how important it was until I got to college, because what happened in college is I started doing things that I didn't think were so good. But what really confused me is I didn't feel badly about it. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be a really bad person, and my whole identity is being good, and I'm confused about this. And it really threw my world upside down because I didn't know who I was anymore. I had identified my self-righteousness, because that's what it was self-righteousness, so I got lost. I've shared before, had that experience where I was just sitting on a mountain and I couldn't figure out up was down, right was left. Like, everything was confused in my mind because I'd held on to this right-wrong, this dualistic idea so tightly that now that it had dissolved, I couldn't see straight. And that's when I was sort of taken out of the planet and looking at the planet, and I was being shown that this whole construct of good and evil, right and wrong, duality, was a human construct, and that it wasn't real. It was all humanly decided, but there was something much greater than that. And that, I would say that would confuse me, but I was already in such a state of confusion that it didn't confuse me. But I wasn't quite sure how to live after that vision, because I only knew how to live based on I want to do the right thing. But if rightness and goodness was a human construct, then wasn't quite sure what that always meant in every moment. So I had to start listening to something more deep, to go deeper in our process. So this is where we find, so I look at that time of self-righteousness, of that moral superiority, and the illusion of it, that I thought it gave me value, it gave me worth, but in fact what it did was separate me from people. It made me, let's be really clear, when we come from any sort of moral superiority, it usually comes from a lack of self-esteem. When you feel good about yourself, you don't have to feel better than people. The Course in Miracles, I think, says that no one's special. Or you could do it the opposite, everyone's special. But the idea is, you're not distinct. Spirit is equally in, through, and as all beings, all life. That's our basic principle. One power, one presence. It is equally in everybody, all at the same time, right now. Saint and sinner, the divine presence shines on us all. And that our role in our awakening is to really see and know that, where we don't feel superior, but nor do we feel inferior. That's deep work. Because one of the things the human mind loves to do is be in a place of comparison. I look at what's happening in our world today, and I see so many people stepping up into how to make this a world that works for everyone, how to be a greater place of heaven on earth. So we see a lot of protesting and calls, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and it's powerful and it's great, and yet it's clearly painful for some people. Then there's pushback, a feeling of it's really needed, and at the same time, other people feel less than because of it. So what do? Do we stop talking? Do we stop speaking our truth because it hurts people? We had that reading today. Do we stop speaking up because people get offended? I go back to that part at with Nirvana and my brothers. I think our intention as we grow, first of all, we're all humanly growing and spiritually. I want to be clear about this one thing. We are both humanly growing and spiritually growing. We can grow spiritually and not grow humanly. We can grow humanly and not grow spiritually. So we're really working on two levels in our world. You can be very spiritually awake. There are people who are monastic monks, Christian monks, or Hindu gurus who are very awake spiritually but feel like their path is still the only path. Or there's other paths, but my path is the best way. Those are people who have not developed humanly, but they've developed spiritually. What's happening in our world is we are really evolving humanly. We're really beginning to see how people have been mistreated, how our systems have left a whole bunch of people out of the good. And people are speaking up and saying, this is not okay. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Why has that become so divisive? Well, I want to address that from two places. I think the first place is not all perspectives are equal, in that if my perspective is, I believe ultimately most people on this world believe everybody deserves equal treatment. Or at least maybe that's the world I live in, but it seems that nobody wants anyone to be hurt. That if we had our ideal world, if we had heaven on earth, which people talk about in Christian churches all over, we would want everyone to be treated equally with love and with respect and have food and have water and have education, have access to all the possibilities equally. However, I think there are some people who feel like, no, it's just my group. My group really is better than other groups, and I don't necessarily want that for everybody. So I say, well, what do we do with that? How do I say they're equal to me if their perspective is, someone else's perspective is that, no, my group is better and my group does deserve special treatment, or my group is different and special? My feeling is that idea is already out of principle. And what I see, Paramahansa Yogananda talks about, that all suffering, all what we would call evil, all that hurt that we cause is done out of ignorance. Nobody would hurt another being if we realized they were us. So even that belief that my group is better, that belief in of itself is ignorance. That belief is people who don't realize who they really are and that they're actually walking with their brothers and sisters and denigrating them, denigrating the earth or denigrating animal life, that they're not seeing the truth of who and what they really are. So as we're standing for truth, we want our world to look like spirit. We want love to be beautifully, powerfully, radiantly, abundantly working for everybody equally. And we have people who may not believe it or see that. Our job is always to start with spirit, to always start with prayer, to see the truth of who and what they really are. People who don't remember, it doesn't often help to beat them up and say you're evil and you're bad. We may need to stop them. Using the example of Hitler, people need to be stopped. I've used my examples in working in the psychiatric hospital. Sometimes when people are in so much pain, they want to bring pain to someone else or to themselves, we would stop them, but we didn't do it with hate. You still stop them, but you can still have your heart open and love and see the truth of who and what they are. And that seems to me, as we're wanting to evolve this world to be a place that works for everyone, to be a place of awakening, of pure spirit, it is our job to hold those who don't remember who they really are to continue to do that work, to hold that place for people who can't see who they are. Prayer is such an important quality. So as we take our stands, for those of you who do participate in marches, for those of you who are vocalizing your presence, at the same time make sure everything is anchored in prayer, in oneness. I remember reading in Gandhi's autobiography, his letter to the British government asking them to leave. We're done. And I think the thing that surprised me was how respectful it was. It wasn't, you idiots, you jerks. It was, you have an incredible nation. You have so much good to offer. You just need to offer it back in your country and not here. But it was respectful. I think of Joel Goldsmith when people were going off to World War II. They would say, Joel was a New Thought spiritual teacher. And they'd say, please pray for my children, my sons who are going off to war to be safe. And he said, I can only agree to do that under one condition. And they said, what's the condition? He said, your sons have to agree, make a commitment to me that every single day they're going to pray for their enemy. That every day they are in this war, they're going to pray for those people with whom they're fighting. And every person that he was holding in prayer through war came home healthy, whole, and safe. When we recognize that no one really is our enemy, that everyone is on our side. Even the people humanly who are enemy are still on our side when they really know who they are. And so we have to do the spiritual work. There's so much work we can do on the surface, but the really deep, profound, transformative work is doing this spiritual work of seeing and knowing who people are. We need to speak our truth, recognizing that even as we speak our truth, there are people who have different perspectives. Sometimes their perspectives may be from an ignorant place, like I was just sharing, but it also could be from a different perspective. I look at Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Their intention was the same, but they had different ways of going about it. There has to be enough room in us to allow these different ways of showing up, of speaking our truth out into the world. So even as I'm listening to my brothers in Reverend Nirvana, they're all good people. They all want that. These are people who are exactly on the same page. They want the highest good for everybody. But their ways of getting there were different. And so as we're doing our spiritual work, we have to see if someone has a perspective that's hurtful, then we need to really, really pray for them. But if we're having a difference of a perspective with someone who basically agrees with us but has a different way of going about it, that is work for us to expand our consciousness to say their way is right too and my way is right. What's beautiful about this whole process as wanting this world to become a transparency of love is it both grows us spiritually. So if we're doing our own spiritual work, by serving out there, by speaking our truth, by getting into these difficult conversations and situations that make us uncomfortable, that's going to grow us spiritually and it's going to grow us humanly. One of the perfect examples for me of how this can look. When we were in Santa Rosa, Reverend Michael had just, Beckwith, was there speaking. We had a group of people that went to Santa Rosa. Reverend Michael Beckwith was giving a 2-hour talk there, and we got to be blessed by the talk. One of the things he shared was that he had been in Sacramento in a protest about police brutality, and it was a peaceful protest. And he was part of the clergy in the peaceful protest. And he said everything was going fine, and then at one point there were some people within the protest, just a small group of people. Everyone was peaceful except for this one small group of people that were beginning to get pretty agitated and saying things and ramping up the energy. And so what they saw then was the police reaction to that, and they're beginning to amp up their wanting to respond. And what he said he saw was that it looked like it was going to move into a little bit more aggressive, maybe some tear gas. So he went and talked to the police officer, crossed those little lines that don't exist. And Reverend Michael, who's a very spiritually awake person, knows they don't exist, just walked over to the police officer and said, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to? And the police officer said, no, I don't want to do this, but that group over there is getting pretty agitated, and we're going to have to respond. That's what I do. That's what my job is. We're going to have to respond. And he said, well, just let me go talk to them. Don't do anything. I know you don't want to do it. I know we can get to a new place. He goes to talk to the people who are agitating. we're peaceful here. Is this really where you want to be? And he's talking to them, and he goes back and forth a couple times till it all calms down. The protest continues, and they all leave in peace. That can't happen if he was coming from a place of other. If it's us, the protesters, against the police are bad, we're good, we're standing for right, you're bad, you're standing for... Then you can't have... That would have blown up. That's where the intensity increases, when that duality starts beating up against each other. So it was great to have clergy there. It took people who are spiritually awake, that's all of us, who are standing in the truth, that we still stand. I mean, to me, it was a perfect example. You're standing for a principle. He was standing for the end of police brutality, and at the same time seeing oneness and harmony, that no separation between himself and the police officer. I don't know if it makes a difference. Reverend Michael Beckwith is African American. There could be a wall there. There wasn't, because he was seeing the truth of that police officer. And I know, because I know Reverend Michael, when he was talking to him, he was talking to the true essence of that police officer. He was talking, yes, you have a role, but he said, you don't really want to do this. He's talking to that spirit of the police officer, which is in everybody all of the time. When we go out, so as a community, as a Lighthouse community, we want to know our oneness. But we also really, really want to be clear that we're very diverse. That even as much as we may all look alike here in this room, that everyone here in this room has completely different perspectives, different paths. And what I hoped is that we become more diverse, that we allow greater diversity to come in and not try to make us a melting pot where we all sort of look the same and do the things and have the same perspectives, but we can allow vastly different perspectives in this community to be expressed, for people to feel safe in expressing these vastly different perspectives, and recognizing that the oneness can contain it all. And that even as we begin to be more and more this within our community, we begin to model that out into the world. That as we go out and care for the people in Livermore community, to be of service, whether it's feeding the homeless, there are so many opportunities to be of service. There are so many people, pets, the environment that are in need of what we have to give. They are us. There's no separation. It's not like we're here and they're there. They're us. It's one. And the more we know this oneness, the more we're going to reach out in service. But recognizing that even as we reach out in service, the people whom we're serving, they have vastly different perspectives than we do, have had definitely world experiences, life experiences than us, and that has led to different perspectives. And that we have that ability to be spacious enough, not to try to convert them to a perspective, oh, you need to see things the way I see them, but absolutely value and hold each and every individual and in their uniqueness. So we're doing it here in our community, we're doing it out in Livermore, we're doing it in our country, which is so divisive, standing for truth and knowing oneness simultaneously, and we're doing it with our planet. Our planet needs us. That's the vision for me for the Lighthouse Center for Spiritual Living. To be God's transparency of love that knows no borders, and not just in the infinite nature, but to allow that infinite expression of variety and uniqueness of pure love to shine in, through, and as each and every one of us. So everybody feels safe in our presence. They feel like they can be who they are, just as they are, without changing a thing in our presence. To me, that's love. Let's pray. Just had to stop for a minute and just let go. Because even whenever we speak our perspective, it's just a perspective, it's not the perspective. And so there's a simultaneous speaking that perspective out and letting it go at the same time, being open and available always to the infinite nature of pure spirit, to reveal a new way of seeing, a new way of doing, a new way of choosing moment to moment, breath by breath. So I begin actually with letting go. And may we all let go and just listen. Just listen to this divine presence within us. How great thou art, how great thou art. How infinite, how wonderful. We just allow ourselves to melt into the vastness of pure being that is unencumbered by labels or concepts, that is absolutely free of all human limitation, form, and yet it is more real than the chairs in which we are sitting. It is our very breath. It infuses our being uniquely in a way that it infuses no other being. Each and every one of us, these gorgeous, unique, powerful lights of the infinite. And we allow ourselves to say yes to this unique expression. We allow ourselves to feel into it, to intuit this feeling of presence, of love, of power in a way that it's not shown in anyone else on this planet. Each and every one of us unique. There are no two people, snowflakes, water drops that are alike. It's beyond anything we can conceive. So we let go of trying to conceive it and just let it be. Let it shine through us. Let it shine through our thoughts and celebrate our thoughts. Let it shine through our feelings and celebrate our feelings. Let it shine through our bodies and celebrating our bodies, celebrating our entire life experience, those that which we may label good and those which we may label bad, knowing that all of it is a divine, unique story as each and every one of us, and it is holy and it is sacred, all aspects of who and what we are. This beautiful, multi-dimensional expression of oneness. And we celebrate it and we stand in the power of our story, of our way of expressing. Knowing that even as we stand in the power of our individual unique expression, we are infinitely spacious enough to allow all unique expressions into our heart and soul, that we are surrounded by uniqueness and expression that are completely different from us, and we are big enough to allow all of the stories to infuse our heart, our body, our mind, our soul, to feel into this vast oceanic connection of oneness that we can experience when we open our heart and our body and our mind to let it all in. Where we are that infinite yes that says yes to all of it, to stand in the truth of who and what we really are, to have the patience for ourselves and for others, where we forget who we are, where we forget and lose our true connection with this infinite source. That happens all the time throughout the day. We are patient and compassionate with that forgetting, with ourselves and with other people, individually and collectively. Because we know Spirit will always remember who it is eventually. And so we allow that space. We allow that space within us and with each other. And knowing that it gets activated when we come together on a Sunday morning. And so how grateful I am, Divine Presence, for bringing all of us here together today. That this Divine Presence that has brought us here is a gift to itself, to remember who and what we really are, to stand in the truth of who and what we really are. We didn't make who we really are. We are simply the vehicles of recognition of who and what we really are. And we live, move, and have our being in this constant and consistent recognition of the divine love moving and pouring through us at every level and dimension of our being. We move through the rest of our day and the rest of our week with our hearts wide open into infinity, allowing the divine nature to reveal its glory of its presence as all the people around us, as all the life forms around us. We let it all in. Our hearts and our minds and our bodies are big enough to accept all of it. And this is the place of pure healing. As Ernest Holmes says, there's nothing to be healed, only God to be revealed. And this is who we are, revealing the love of the infinite intelligence and spirit of presence. For all of this, I just say thank you. Thank you. I invite us all to say a quiet thank you in our hearts. Speak a word of prayer for yourself and for those you love, inwardly or outwardly. The Divine Presence is always listening. The Divine Presence is always giving. How grateful I am. for the divine presence as each and every one here, and for the fulfillment of this prayer now. We release this word and all these words spoken and felt, knowing that as they have been spoken and felt, they are done. And we say together as one. And so it is. Amen.